Siddur de Pas, Ois Hey. So let's look at the last paragraph of the previous Ois. After speaking about the two ways of birurim, milamayla lamata, milamata lamayla, that's the difference between lechem min hashamayim and lechem min haaretz. The lechem min hashamayim, we said, is the shortish of tikkun hu'inyin hagila milamayla lamata. That's the revelation from above to below, as described earlier, where the more the receptive, the ''תשכ dusha, respond, and the more difficult ones, lower ones, which come from a higher source, are expelled, rejected. That's reflected by the man in the midbar. That it's neshaves, but coming into the settled land, as I nifseka yidin, then it stopped. That is now the birum of the mata l'maylish, and asa the avidas v'yigias adam, and this is through a person's toil and effort, b'chal prate and yonim, in all of the details of charishos, zriya, plowing, seeding, sheshona hatana b'sidura the past, that the Tana chooses to address, to list and define the lamates malaches. So the Tana uses sidura de pas, the order of making bread, because that is the halav sabirurim, which on Shabbos we don't do, having completed it during the week and getting the koyach from Shabbos to be able to do in the course of the week, course of the coming week, elevating the previous week and empowering the week to come. Shehu inyan avodas habirurim b'derech hislapshus malmata l'mayla is sidura de pas, which you'll now explain. V'protius, the order of making bread, that's the avodas habirurim b'lamata l'mayla. Although, as we'll see, lo pashut. Let's see what the Maimon says. Or say the avodas habirurim b'lamata l'mayla b'lachem l'oretz, to explain this at birurim the way it is in our avodah. Earthly bread, the Tana the Siddur, the pas knockout that the Tana takes to say that of making bread, and that is ha'chodesh v'azireya, plowing, planting, ma'amer, making a pile of the grain, v'akoitzer, reaping, v'atoichen, grinding, v'aloshen, kneading, and so on. All of these have their parallel in Avedis Adam. And the matter is as follows. First, before anything can be produced, the ground has to be broken up. That's the plowing. This is the introduction to all malachis. The discusses there where the watering the ground is what Isser is it? And one of the opinions is that it's the Isser of plowing. The Marpe Ada for both have the effect of softening the earth. What he wants to bring out here is that Cherisha softens the earth. No, we all know what that means. So beginning of Avodah is a general bittul, a general softening of the ego. And that's not a dainty process. It's not delicate. It's banging away and at the earth, breaking it up. Easier said than done. But this is the Akdama. This is where a good friend helps. A true friend. If I bring it, if it's the way it should be. So this is the bittul kloli. Shal yodei nasis hachshoda. This makes hachshoda means to be in a state of preparedness. The earth is now ready to yield. Sheyuchal li singing avodah, after which avodah can begin. Okay, what's the beginning of actual avodah? Is planting a seed. Not finished with bittul yet. Shizereya, garden, he plants a seed, v'nirkav baratz, and it rots, it germinates, it decomposes. What is this? Gewald already. So he had the bittul, the chalisha, now what? V'nyoni b'avodahu hamariros. This is embitteredness. Not depression, chas v'shalom, which is the opposite. Embitteredness is empowering and energizing. He already begins on the process of avodah, and just to revisit the first step, I mean, they're just vague words, and each one should apply it to themselves. But the chalisha basically is the recognition that the way the matzav is no good. This is not intolerable. This has to change. I have to change. Avodah is not tweaking me. Avodah has to be an element of real transformation. So the chalisha means it's the opposite of smugness or content, being content. The person's content in his Yiddishkeit is just to make his contentment more. I'm happy. I want to be happier, so I use Yiddishkeit. So that's a good start. Any start is good. But if we're speaking avodah, so it has to begin with the fundamental recognition that and it's got to go. It has to be softened. Instead of the mekeli felikus, or more precisely, likus I can be useful. I can be a keli to carry out what the Eibishter wants. So then begins the avodah. This is like real dead Hashishi stuff. We're not exempt from it. And that's the seed. The seed rots. So what's that? That's meridus. That's embitteredness. And what does the embitteredness come from? This is avodah. Shebom is bonus begdulas avaya, that he meditates Hashem's greatness. No. So why does it engender bitterness? Let's see. I'm not sure exactly what the pshat and all of this is. It might will touch it personally. I guess if you don't do an avodah, so it's like all foreign. Let's get the language or the idea right. Try to. It's not enough meridas stam. That's like the first stage. He's embittered over his own failures. That's not enough. That's more. That's the chalisha, perhaps. This is an affirmative embitteredness. It's part of a relationship with God, not just your own failure. And meaning, and what is meridos from matters of godliness? And what is that? So he says, the because the bitter that we do through our own avodah is limited. We're stuck with ourselves at the end of the day. The main bitter comes from above. And that's where he's saying, he can't be stam meridas of his own matzav. It's not so much his matzav, but the truth of Elikushim is burned in Begdula Savaya, that he thinks about the greatness of Hashem and in the presence of God. Therefore, he feels the distance. It's a big difference. So the difference is his failure, he hasn't accomplished, or in the presence of the Eibishter and feeling his grandeur and presence, to feel small and embittered and insignificant. And that he needs to connect because of the truth of Elikus. Very cryptic and very vague. Again, each one to think about it and apply it. So the Nikud Yishim is Beinin Begadlus Havaya. Havaya Bechinas Ma. Havaya is one of the Miluyim of Shema. And what's Havaya? And this is the birr of Shema we're talking about. And what is Havaya? In all of its Miluyim, it's all Shehu Haya V'Yikachad, and all of the Miluyim, it's all means the same thing in its general meaning, past, present, and future all at once. It's in the Zohar. So the grandeur, the infinite grandeur, the eternal truth of Elikos, and so confronting this in he's embittered from his own petty matzav. And there's no change for Hashem. He's eternal and unchanging. This meditation engenders a great bitterness within himself. What's the bitterness? The bitterness is that here I am in this world of tiny little changing world, and the emes is transcendent and eternal and forever, and that's the truth. So he's not, where am I? So this is not a personal failure. That's more charisha. He's got to be honest with himself when he starts the avodah. This is already in a relationship, and it's not a stira to simcha either, as he explains in Tanya. This is a whole sugya, literally in Tanya. The difference between beridus and atzvos, and beridus is very motivating. The opposite of atzvos, which is to give up, it's opposite. Even though there's an element, he says, at the very beginning that is depressing, but it then translates immediately into action. Akolponim is very brief in the language over here, and again, each one should think about it. Now comes even stronger words. Even stronger words. Omdom adayin. So he's embarked on the avodah. Started off with cherisha, he's beating himself up, plowing the ground, softening the earth. He's not smug. Beyond that, now there's meridus, there's a real desire, a real appreciation of Elikos and his own paucity, and therefore a driven desire to connect, to carry out the divine will, to be a keli. So l'choyre now, we're ready now for love and tainuk, not quite. On the madain, now we still need a zehiros, we got to be careful. What now? And that is that the bittul itself engenders a kind of very subtle yeshes. Can you imagine that? I don't know what the Oisius, he's proud of his bittul. Takes pride in his bittul, in his humility, in his meridus. There's a gewaltige levels there, but the man here. We'll see later, Avodah, that we'll put it into context. About from Kundetzitz Achayim, which Rabbi often quotes. We'll see later. At any rate, let's go further as he goes through the Sidur of the Pas, the putting of the bread on the table. This is what it is. So therefore, what's the Eitzah? That there shouldn't be the Yeshes from his bittul. This is our problem. So that's reaping, cutting, harvesting. What happens there is you sever the grain. So now it's complete, detachment from a place where it grew, which means the person now is undergoing a real transformation. It's not the same person. In Avodah, these are stages of davening. She doesn't spell out for us. We could possibly. Hoidu is cherisha. It's a general acknowledgement. Thank you. Everything I have is yours. The general instinctual thank you. And then the other levels of davening. But akoponim, as you know, I'm sure you remember that Psuki de Zimra. Everybody remembers Chassidus teaches that. Zamra ritzim, to prune the thorn. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Zamra means to sing, of course, but it means also to prune. So here Iwad is cutting. And that's It's explaining Chassidus, Shmoneser is a level of complete bittul, the bittul of Atzilus, which he can't even speak. And he has to begin with Admo Tiftach, and then Rafi Agitilasach. My Lord, open my lips and my mouth will relate your praises. He's not even shaykh to praise, which begs the question, how is he having its long list of shopping list? He needs forgiveness, he needs parnasa, he needs health. Can't even speak. So this answers because you want me to have that, so that's what I'm asking. Bakapanim Shunesri stands head bowed, silent. That is already after what? After Melechas HaKoitzer. Well, that is the Melechas HaKoitzer. What now? Okay, so now we're ready for the affirmative. And then the grain is made into a pile. Sheaves. That's where it's after Shmones and everything engaging the world being in. So Yosef has a dream that they're gathering sheaves in the field. After the harvest, you take many stalks and bring them together, and tie them in one bundle. And and that's called an aluma. So what is that? So now he's ready and he's doing. He's elevating the sparks. And the Rebbe is relentless here in purging us of any element of yeshes, because even after all this hakdama and avodah, should I find chassid already? What do you want from him? No. The word alumim also comes from the word ilim, which means mute. He has a mouth, but the shoisik is silent. Shoinyan habitl, that's bitl. Even after the bitl shmeina Esther, gewalt, so is bitl noisef, still another bitl is demanded for inyan haiskalalus the ma'almim malumim, and that is the bringing together of all the netzutzik dusha, and that has to be done also in the sense of bitl, namely, I mean, each one should touch, but he has to know that the koyach that all his accomplishments, it's only mitzad the koyach is given to milamayla. All the kiruvim netzutzik dusha and all that he built and so on. And he sees it, he's looking at it, it's all mitzvah the maila. There's a, Yeah, l'chod. It starts already after davening and the tachanun, it's already, because tachanun already now we're getting into the down and dirty, and then oleino, it's the mindset already of getting out there starts after Shmones, but the actual avodah is definitely his achievement, he's built, he's created. So there too has to be silence and bittul, because I guess it's another nisayon. Look what I've accomplished. That he should understand that it's all mitzvah the koyach is given to him. So I'm trying to get a hold of this, the following, and that is just read to me the other day. Gimel Tmuz. There is a WhatsApp group. My wife tells me that shluchas over 50. It's a different age and stage in life, whatever. There's a WhatsApp, and how big it is. Anyway, so one of the people, Miriam Telsner is the daughter of Rabbi Grona in Australia. So she says like this. She relates that her father, Rabbi Grona, this is towards the end. I think it was the last time, possibly when most of his, not all of his grandchildren all over the world, but some of his grandchildren were there in his bedroom. He was bedridden. Last time I came to Australia, he was already bedridden, with mind completely completely there. Still the great towering personality, even lying in bed, he was still larger than life. And one of the grandchildren recorded what he said. So she just gave it over, but I would love to hear the recording. So I asked Nechama to text, WhatsApp, if she could. Didn't follow up, didn't hear that she did yet. So it would be nice to hear, beautiful to hear. Anyway, the Nakuda is saying that between a mikveh and a mayan, a mikveh has a shear, minimum of 40 saw, but a mayan is metayed b'kol shu. Smallest amount of water, provided it covers the whole body. So the person is toher. That this whole shear doesn't apply. So he's saying that it can be a mashahu, but if you're connected to the mayan, then you bring tahara. We have to know that we're a mashahu. And that, but I can say there was, but he's a person that built transformed the city. The Lubavitch in Melbourne, not one campus, but several campuses. And then all the Chabad houses, all the Chabad houses, some of them built beautiful edifices, are all the results of the yeshiva. Yeshiva is the center. And he's saying this is sincerely to his children, to know that it's not, the moment you think it's your koiches, it's all because you're plugged into the mind, if you're plugged into the mind. But what he's saying over here, that after the whole, sees the gathered, the bundles of stalks, the great accomplishment. So there has to be the ma'almi malumim, the bittul, the recognition that it's all koiches that are given. And halavai, as once the Rebbe said, halavai, we did not, halavai, ishkala gemacht. We didn't ruin it. Continuing, kol zehu bitter edition. This is all the bitter edition. Now the bitter edition, as you're describing it now, is malamata lamayla. But Yadur, it's known, bitter edition in a maspik, tzarechli is bitter sheni. There has to be a bitter sheni. Now, the Yadua, he sends us to Itaka there in Parshas Vayeshev, where Yosef is talking about the stalks. The bitter sheni, there's a gilda that comes milamayla. He explains there, Barichas there, that the first bitter, at the end of the day, you're doing it, so it's limited. So after you made that keli, then has to come the bitter that comes milamayla. It's a little bit of a stira, not a little bit, but because here he spoke about the gilda milamayla as the first bitter, and the bitter sheni avodah milamata lamayla. He's telling you the fact. There in Torah, which he's quoting here, the bitter sheni is milamayla lamata. It's not a stira. As I explained, there's two Sarusa Delayla, which starts the Avodah. And then there's the Sarusa Delayla that comes after the Avodah. So Biru Shema, in other words, both precedes and follows the Avodah. L'chura, that's the answer. Otherwise, it's a flat-out contradiction. But that's what it's explaining, as you're all familiar. There's the Sarusa Delayla, which empowers the Avodah. And then there's the Tzarusa de Le'ela, which is beyond the Avodah, which comes as a result of the Avodah. Yogaita l'matzasa. It has to be the Yegiyah, but the result is a Mitziyah, far beyond the Yegiyah. But it only comes after Avodah. And that's the second one. Now to make it a little bit more complex, what it goes to describe now, it's still Avodah. It's still Avodah, even though he's invoking the Bitter Sheni, which is Milamayla. I don't have an answer to that. The answer we could say to that is that even all the inyanim, this brings this, that all the inyanim, even the inyanim come Milamayla, also have to have the parallel in Avodah. Yesh loimer. I don't know, it's a bit open-ended. I'm just pointing out the components of the puzzle here a little bit. So in continuing, Variyadua, again, so the bitter dish is not enough, we need a bitter sheni. So what's now? So the sheaves. So we're not finished. There's no bread on the table yet. So the chli is shinre mahus. Complete transformation. Before he spoke about the cutting And he said that's neka legambri miyeshusa mitziyusa. He's completely cut from his yeshes. Now it's not from his yeshes. Now it is his ma'us. It's a bigger transformation. Fellas, can I tell you? So what? Let's read it. Let's read it. Sheishtane Mohusoi. He's talking about the grain. The grain's got to undergo a fundamental change. The Yochalias Michael Adam can become bread. This is all in Avodah. So what follows now is grinding and kneading. Grinding changes the kernels fundamentally. Av Melacha explains it's a Akdama to the. It's a whole Akdama explaining Av Malach and Tulda, right? There's 39 Av Malachas, and then there's the Tuldas, which means like literally Av, father, parent, offshoot, which are also Surah De'erais. But the point he makes there is that the Tulda doesn't have to be the same. Exactly. The example he brings is Teichen. So the Av Malach is grinding. That's what they needed to do to produce the wheat for the karbonis, the mincha, the flour. And what's the tulda on Shabbos, which is awesome with the rice, is the machatich dak to cut something very finely. So tulda satich, and that's a tulda. So that was just bringing here the Alter Rebbe to bring out that the Alter Rebbe's vort is that even though they're not the same, Shatoichen meshanis aguf arishan legam. The words of the Alter Rebbe, I think, in Tanya in Shulchan Aruch, that grinding completely changes it, whereas cutting it very fine does not. When you grind it, you can't even recognize what it was. But if you cut it very fine, you can still see the original component. He says over there, nonetheless, it's still a Issa Derais, it's a Tulda, but he wants to bring out over here these words that Toichen is meshanis aguf arishan legam. That's what he wants to be. A transformation. So now what? Now you got to need it. To our untrained ears, or I speak for myself, not for you, but untrained avoiders, like the same thing, different words. Okay, bit. But it's not. It's a person who doesn't avoid it's not. So what's now with the water? And what makes the shinyamahos, the completion of it, the next avoid, the next malacha, the alisha b'mayim, is kneading with the water. And we're concerned that Rebbe took us all the way to here because they're talking about challah. She'oz, hu'achi of the challah, that's when the obligation to separate challah begins, as soon as the water is mixed. From the moment she mixes her dough with the water, the obligation to separate challah begins. The footnote they sent us to the Rishalmi in various places. There it says, there it's talking about it. There's two sources in the halacha and the Rishalmi and Medrash. The halacha I just told you that the chi of challah begins from the time that the water, even though it's not fully kneaded yet. He wants to bring out the diuk before I go into the halacha. He wants to bring out the diuk that it's the water components, the ikar over here. Once the water is mixed with the flour, and there's already a little bit of the dough form, even though it's not a massive dough yet, the chiyuv of challah, bringing out, that's the water, that's the ikar. And he's going to say, water is ava. That's what he wants to bring out of it. I'm just telling you that the Yerushalmi and the Medrash don't speak in halacha. They say that what they say is that the Eibishter formed, the other Marishan is the trumo, the chal of the world. The Eibishter formed him from the earth, that's the flour and the water. That's why a woman separates challah, because it was through the chet that Adam was compromised, and so she thereafter is fixing it. Akoponi, then the Hora says, see Rambam in the Mishnah, there he talks there about the halacha, that the chiyuv begins once you put in the water. So what the ikar therefore of making the chiyuv is the water. So what's the water? That's the next stage. He's saying that needing lush, the ikar is the water. What's the vinyan about veido hu ha'ava nimsheches kamay? Now it's love, which is drawn like water. A person is drawn after likus. Shezo ikar avoda. That's the ikar avoda. This was still not like the achana. Now we get to the finished product, as it were, the challah, and that's the ikar avoda. Kemaymer, it says in Zohar, es pulchan like a pulchan derech musa. There is no avoda like the avoda of love. Vav. What about the ava sherish be'esh? Kiyadu, and he doesn't give me a footnote, so I don't know where to go with this. But shegam ha'ava kerish be'esh, even the ava, flames of fire, and the ikra inyana ava, the main thing is the love, sheklolos in yonder humayim. I don't know. Rish be'esh, fire is opposite of water, obviously. Fire consumes. So he's saying that even the all-consuming, longing fire, where the person seeks to be consumed and absorbed within the object of his love, the ikir is the mayim. Still, that's the ikir of ava, is the water, which is the longing and the love. Period, not the consumption of the self. The self is already being transformed. Now connect. So. Maybe that's what he means here. But again, there's no, not sending us anywhere. Let's finish the ois value. And now, it's now become the challah, to all of this avodah, food for man. Who's the man? The b'chinas Adam, alien shalakise, now is the connection to and the offering to the Adam alien, the supernal man, the Eibishter, as you'll explain in more detail in the ois of. All right, friends.